on CBS Sports Radio and televised on CBS Sports Network. And back into some Tom Brady stuff, Brian, as we welcome in studio Amy Dardashtian, attorney, Huffington Post legal contributor, former CBS New York correspondent. Amy, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning to you guys. Thanks so much for having me.
over there.
Yeah, I love that song. I mean, I don't know who sings it, but it was awesome.
That's Flo Rida.
It got me going.
Attorneys are allowed to like Flo Rida?
You need a little juice early this morning. So.
Well, we will provide the juice. We always do.
I say that every morning.
All right, so yesterday, very interesting decision, and Judge Richard Berman, he wasn't messing around with making the NFL, well, basically embarrassed and taking away Roger Goodell's power, and it seemed like fairness was the big thing here, that this 4-game suspension just not fair. When you read the 40 pages, why do you think fairness? How did he come to that conclusion that the NFL just wasn't fair with the 4 games?
Okay, so first of all, he didn't rule at all on the merits of the decision. So he didn't say whether Tom Brady was guilty or not. What he said was that this was unfair, and the major reason is because Tom Brady was never given any notice that he could be punished at all, let alone in this way, this harsh, in the judge's opinion, severe way, or that, you know, being generally aware of something could carry the punishment of a suspension, or that not cooperating could carry the punishment of a suspension. And we can talk more about that because Wells even testified that, hey, I didn't give Tom Brady any notice. I didn't say to him, if you don't hand over these documents, then you will face a suspension. So he didn't have notice. That's number one. Number two, the judge says that he should have had the right to cross-examine and to hear the testimony of the NFL's lead lawyer because he was a co-investigator. And then number three, he should have had access to the interview notes with witnesses because the judge felt that this was material to the decision.
So it's about discovery going both ways, and that's usually what happens in a trial. There is discovery. And additionally, when you talk about notice, I think we kind of saw this coming from what the judge had said previously. It seemed like he was always admonishing the league, the fact that the players never got anything. There was nothing saying, hey, if you break this rule, this is going to be the punishment. The organization at the top got, you know, the memorandums or the policy as far as what would occur if a ball was deflated or something of that nature. Was that something also that the judge pointed to? It seems like he was always saying that to the league, amongst other things, like this wasn't truly an independent investigation.
Right. Well, there's 2 points there. The first thing that you said is that the league did try to justify notice and say that there's this policy on integrity and competitive rules. But then Brady's lawyers say the players didn't get that policy. Right. That policy was only given to the club owners. So then the league says, well, but Brady had notice under the conduct detrimental to the league clause. And the judge says, no, that's way too broad. I mean, you can't apply that to this situation when you're applying that to situations like domestic violence with Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson. Even in that circumstance, they were punished under a specific domestic violence policy. So he's saying that you need a specific policy to put people on notice. You can't just grab clauses from here and there. You know, not only that, but if you look back at the history, the judge says in 40 years, they haven't found an example of somebody being punished with a suspension for obstruction. They had Brett Favre in 2010, and he was punished with a fine. So you can't even look at the history of the cases to find that kind of notice. Then to your other point, you're talking about the investigation not truly being independent. And the judge made so many jabs at the NFL because not only was Ted Wells working for the same law firm that represented the NFL in the hearings, but the NFL's lead lawyer was a co-investigator, and then Goodell wouldn't have him testify. Not only was he co-investigator, but he edited the Wells report.
Right.
So, I mean, you had the lawyers you had the judge actually asking the lawyers for the NFL, did Jeff Pash edit the Wells report? And they're like, oh, well, Judge, I mean, he's a Harvard-educated lawyer. You can't expect a Harvard-educated lawyer to get his hands on a 140-page document and not put his 2 cents in. Yeah, you would expect a Harvard-educated lawyer not to do that. Right. I mean, but obviously that's going to make it not independent when you've got this guy marking it up who works for the NFL.
We're talking to Amy Dardashtian. Yep. She's in studio with us on Gio and Jones, Huffington Post legal contributor and an attorney, as we break down the Tom Brady NFL decision from Judge Berman. Now, it doesn't seem like the NFL side had a chance in this. It doesn't seem like it was even close. And a lot of the legal experts going into this before the decision said, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I know he's come down hard on the NFL in some of these hearings, but it could go either way. And you know, with the CBA, they gave Goodell this power. I mean, do you think that there was any sort of even chance for the NFL to win this thing the way that Berman came out with these 40 pages? Looked like a blowout.
Right. And what you're saying about Goodell with the partiality, I mean, that's, interestingly enough, that could have been a grounds for this judge to use to overturn the arbitration award, because judges usually won't overturn arbitration awards because it would undermine the process. I mean, this is an alternative to litigation. If every time somebody loses, they're going to go challenge this in a court of law and then win, what's the point of going through arbitration? So he could have, one of the grounds is that Roger Goodell was partial, but even though he took jabs at Roger Goodell, he didn't specifically rule on Brady's claim that Roger Goodell was partial. And the reason is, I think, because he wanted to preserve his decision on appeal. He felt that he was safe, the judge, with just saying that, listen, these guys violated the constitutional right to due process. There was no notice. This was prejudicial. It was unfair. Had he ruled on Roger Goodell's partiality, and then had it gone to an appeal, which now it's going to an appeal, then the league could argue, listen, even though you don't think he was partial, this was agreed upon in the collective bargaining agreement. He has the power, Roger Goodell, under Article 46, to be an arbitrator on the panel, and whether you like it or not. So the players agreed to this and the union agreed to this. And you're allowed to agree to terms that, and then you can't later say, well, that's not fair. We didn't expect X, Y, Z.
Right. Yeah, and the appeal aside and whatever occurs there, is this a precedent for moving forward? Players are going to say now, hey, I'm going to challenge everything in court, forget an arbitrator. I'm going straight to court because I've seen the NFL lose time and time again now.
I think so, but we've seen that before. I mean, we saw that with A-Rod, you know, and that's why the courts have to be prudent in even deciding to review these types of cases. But obviously, this judge felt that Goodell was partial, and like I said, even though he didn't specifically rule on it, he brings up several examples of where Goodell was partial. I mean, he says that the Wells report says that Brady more probably than not knew about this. He generally was aware of it. But then Roger Goodell in his decision goes a step further. And he says, no, Brady participated. He's making a conclusive determination that Brady participated, and there's no direct evidence about this. And there are other examples where he felt that Goodell was not only partial, but he says that he dispensed his own brand of industrial justice. So he's making him seem like a power monger, you know, like a recluse, like he's kind of making up his own rules.
My own brand of industrial justice on you.
That's scary when you
and
say
you're going to take it.
Oh, boy. That is really creepy.
Don't give me the industrial justice, please. No!
Not again.
But yeah, you can't do that. I mean, even if you're in an arbitration and you're running that arbitration, you have to let the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, be your governing document. And you have to comply with what's common law for the shop, meaning what generally will happen, what's happened in the past, what other cases have said should happen in the future.
Why does Goodell keep losing? Why is the NFL always on the losing side of this? If you look at this case, Ray Rice, Adrian Peterson, the Bountygate scandal with the Saints, is there a common thread on why the NFL is always on the losing end? What is it?
Yes, major common thread. The NFL waits for something to happen and then comes up with a policy afterwards. Why wouldn't, in this day and age, they have a policy for ball deflating? I mean, hasn't this been going on, or isn't it foreseeable that this would go on? Why was there a new domestic violence policy after Ray Rice, and then they couldn't apply the punishment retrospectively, or retroactively rather? So they need specific procedures, and they can't just use terms like conduct detrimental to the league and then punish whichever way they want without putting players on notice that if you do this, you're going to be punished in this way, and this is how you're going to be able to defend yourself, and this is the evidence that you're going to be able to provide, and these are the documents you'll have access to. I mean, there have to be even testing procedures for ball deflation. I mean, you had DeQuell Jackson intercept the pass, right? Then he gives the ball to the Colts equipment manager. They test it before the NFL. Why did they have their hands on it? I mean, that wouldn't be admissible in a court of law. They'd say there was tampering. It was tainted evidence. So you need even protocols just for testing the balls to make it fair.
Right. Now, as we move forward with this appeal process, how long does this take? I mean, could it be a matter of weeks, or could it be a matter of months, a year? How long usually does this take to play out?
It could be months because we've seen that Brady's been putting up a fight, and obviously Roger Goodell is not going to back down. But I think this is somewhat of a waste of time and money for the NFL because there's such a high standard on appeal. I mean, they have to find that this judge abused his discretion in making this decision, or they could find that he based it on a law that was unconstitutional. But this judge based his decision on the unconstitutionality of the NFL's process. So And he covered his tracks, so I don't think that they're going to succeed. And another interesting point is that when Roger Goodell made his decision, he said that the punishment was that Brady would be suspended for 4 games at the beginning of the season. He didn't say a suspension whenever this is decided. So let's say the NFL goes and they win on appeal. Then that would mean that the award would be reinstituted, but Brady would have already played the first 4 games of the season because they're not looking for a stay. They're not applying to the judge for a stay and saying, hold on, let's put a hold on everything until this is formally decided. Don't let Brady play until we've hashed this out. That's not what they're doing. They're letting him go ahead and play. So this is really just Roger Goodell trying to win in the end because the punishment's going to be null and void.
Right.
Gio and Jones with Amy Dardashtian in studio, attorney and Huffington Post legal contributor. And the NFL is going to be taken to court again at some point because it just happens all the time. If you are advising Roger Goodell, his attorneys, and the league, how do you do things differently so you're not embarrassed like you continue to be embarrassed time and time again when these things get into the courts?
Like I said, you need specific policies spelled out, and also you need consistency. You can't have Roger Goodell recusing himself with the Ray Rice hearing, but then acting as an arbitrator for Tom Brady because it looks like he's got beef with Tom Brady, that he's out to get him. You can't have Troy Vincent sending a letter to Bob Kraft saying the reason that this is such a harsh punishment is because we not only want to punish what happened, but we want to send a strong message and blatantly saying we're making an example of Tom Brady.
Right.
I mean, you can't have that. And don't take things this far when there's no direct evidence. Roger Goodell's sitting there saying, well, we believe that Tom Brady participated because the equipment managers would never do such a thing without Tom Brady's approval. He's jumping to conclusions. Tom Brady destroyed his cell phone. That's suspicious. He did it. I mean, look for direct evidence, and in the absence of direct evidence, don't take things this far.
The league, we talked about this earlier, compounding the problem is that the league, when they meted out punishment, they then immediately had their preeminent strike by saying, no, you're not going to go to Judge Jody in Minnesota. We're going to handle this right here in New York with Judge Berman. How silly does that make them look now, the fact that they tried to cover their tracks or just cover their arse, let's just be honest about it, by saying, okay, we know you're going to take me to court, but you're going to do it here in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, they rushed to beat him to file because if you file first, then you get to have it heard, where you filed.
Right.
And also, not only that, but there was more jurisdiction. The NFL has the headquarters in New York, and there was really no connection to Minnesota. But the reason they did that is because in the past, the rulings had gone in favor of the players and against the NFL in Minnesota. So they figured, we have a better chance in New York. But it really comes down to the substance of the case, the arguments, and most importantly, the judge that you get.
Does this have any impact on the other penalty that the NFL handed out to Robert Kraft and the Patriots with the draft picks and the fines? And how about those 2 employees, the 2 equipment guys who are on an indefinite leave of absence? Does this Brady decision help out any of that stuff now with the Patriots in the future?
I don't believe it will affect that penalty on Kraft and the club because they apparently had much more substantial evidence against these 2 guys. I mean, the guy was in the restroom with the footballs for 1 minute and 40 seconds. What the heck was he doing in there with footballs, multiple footballs,
I take footballs to the John all the time.
And by the way, right. I mean, yeah, leave it to the imagination, but...
Not on this show. Don't do that. Don't do that on this show. I'm just warning you.
Also, why are these guys allowed to take the footballs off the field after they're tested by officials? That doesn't make sense. So, but because there was evidence against them, and because of that policy on integrity that was given out to the club owners. They know that if there are any personnel who are found guilty of something within the arbitration hearing and that their guilt is not being challenged, then they can be held responsible too.
So in your professional opinion, how does this end? Because we thought it was over and we're tired of talking about it. We just want to get to football.
Right.
How does this end?
It ends, well, it proceeds with tons of more media coverage. And then it ends with, I think, Roger Goodell being more embarrassed than he already is.
Wow. Now, are there people out there say, I heard this offered yesterday, that maybe a Sean Payton, someone the league came down on pretty harshly with Bountygate, could retroactively go back and sue the league now with this ruling coming down in favor of Tom Brady?
I don't think so, because you have a certain number of days where you can exhaust your legal options. So it really depends on how much time's expired. But I don't think so. And also, I don't think him or the league are going to want to call attention to that. So even if he were to make that threat, perhaps they would have settlement conferences and just try to settle it, because it's like, how much negative publicity can they get?
Right. And lastly, for me, I think this independent joke, because players like myself have been screaming and hollering about this for a long, long time. Hey, it's not truly an independent investigation. It's not truly an independent exam. If you pick the doctor you want me to go to when I'm fighting for in-line of duty disability. So you think we're done with that now after this ruling?
Who knows with Roger Goodell, but I think that he should remove himself from the arbitration panel in the future, because, listen, there's a relationship between him and the players. So there's always going to be tension there. They're always going to feel like he's out to get me. So I think that's one change that should definitely be made. And then, obviously, you're not going to want somebody who works for a firm that's conducting the investigation to then represent you at a hearing. It just screams of prejudice and bias.
Amy, great stuff. We appreciate you coming in.
Yep.
Amy Dardashtian, check her stuff out on Huffington Post. Gio and Jones with the lines back open. Your thoughts on what happened yesterday with Tom Brady in the NFL? 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. We're coming right back on CBS Sports Radio.